There's nothing to this, folks. I know that you can go to your local grocery store and you'll sometimes see these boneless loins on sale. And some of you get tired of waiting for the guy to cut it for you. You can take these home and cut them yourself. There's nothing to it. I do this at home. I'll buy a boneless pork loin at Kroger's. And then I go home and I cut them up myself. And I can control however thick or thin I want them. For example, this is, I'm going to face this guy up a little bit here. This is my cut. Okay?
Yep.
Here's my wife's cut.
There you go.
There you go. His and hers. You know, and I can do that. I can do that. Or if I want to get stylish with it, with this boneless loin. Cut through, don't go all the way through. Butterfly chops. Things along, or I can leave the whole thing whole and smoke it. Exactly. Or roast it. I have this neat recipe that I stole from Missouri when I came over here called Firecracker Rub. It sounds hot, but really isn't. It's mainly brown sugar. Coat that thing, put it in the smoker at about 225, no hotter than that for about 4 or 5 hours. Okay, that'll get your foot kicking like you rubbed the dog on the belly, you know. It's the way to do it there. It's the way to do it. Or I even get real stylish like this for those people that want ribs but don't want the bone. See how I've got 2 separate muscles on here? For some reason that just grosses people out. I don't understand it, folks. The psychology of a shopper fascinates me, as you can tell. I'll do the same thing I did with that butterfly chop. I butterfly that out. Come in here like so. You gotta realize I'm an old retail meat cutter, so everything has to look nice. So that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. Boneless, country style ribs. Just like that. Just like that. And there's a bunch of stuff.
I know I need to wait till later, but I find that when you buy a loin, that the white meat's very tough and the dark is very tender.
Exactly.
And you can't tell when you buy it in the store.
Yeah, you're exactly right. What he's talking about, what I've cut up right here, believe it or not, if this was beef, this part here would be the ribeye. And this darker colored muscle right here actually is much more tender than the lighter colored muscle. That's why if you're buying a ribeye steak, you get it off of the large end because you've got more of that dark. In a beef, it's all going to be red, but in pork, it comes out in different colors because we slaughter at such a younger age. But I'll always get a ribeye steak off of the large end because this muscle right here is a lot bigger and it's going to have a more overall tender steak than if I get one off of this end over here where that muscle's not very big and that loin muscle is huge. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. How you tell in the grocery store, let's see if we can put him back together. A little bit here. So, notice how it kind of tapers off more towards the end. If you get it off the loin half, the sirloin half, it's going to be a fairly consistent diameter, but off of the rib half, it's going to be a little bit more tapered, and that's how you can tell on those guys. So if you want that
The tapered.
tapered, yep,
Is it more tender?
is more
Oh, yeah.
tender,
Oh, yeah.
exactly. From a retail standpoint, the reason why we started doing it like this with these boneless country style ribs, well, it just doesn't look as pretty as these guys. And so since we buy with our eyes and we eat with our eyes as well, we start taking that two-toned in and just making boneless country style ribs out of it. Because it looks better. It looks better. All right. Other questions? No? We're in the home stretch, folks. All right. 2 things I want to talk about. Or 3 things, actually. All right. I'm gonna set all this stuff out so you can look at it. This guy right here, actually these two pieces right here. If I were to put this on a bandsaw, this Boston butt, and start cutting him at the blade end, I'd have pork steak. But that's boring. That's no fun. All right, let's do this. Let's get a cooler, fill it full of water. Well, not full, about 3/4 of the way full. Put some salt in there, usually about a cup and a half of salt. And then I'm gonna get a jar of molasses. And pour that jar of molasses in there, mix all that up. What I've done is created a brine. I'm gonna take these two pieces here, drop them in there, weight them down with a bag of ice so the whole entire thing stays covered, okay? Come back 24 hours later, and whatever kind of rub you want to put on there. Like I said, I use that firecracker rub that we got at UK. And then I'm going to put these in a smokehouse at no more than 225 degrees. And I know they're done when I can reach my hand in here and I can pull this blade bone out with my 2 fingers and it comes out with absolutely no piece of meat on it whatsoever. That's when it's done. And then I'm gonna wait about a half hour till things cool off and I'm gonna shred it up. And guess what I have? Pulled pork. There's a barbecue place in town, is there?
There's a long story behind that.
But yeah, you know, and you've got to, basically the reason why I brine it is because I'm overcooking it to get it to shred apart. And what's happening is some chemistry, all right? I have changed the osmotic pressure of these muscle cells and I've opened them up and they've sucked in that brine. And that's the reason why I like to use molasses, because I'm using so much salt that molasses is going to counteract that salty flavor. And so I've just filled those muscle cells full of that brine, and that's how I keep it from drying out, because I'm overcooking it to get it to shred. You see what I'm saying? That's why I do that. That's why I do that. All right, does that make sense to everybody? All right, the last thing I'm going to show you is this. All right. Now, I'm going to try to do this without making entirely too much of a mess. In this bag, I have to do 100 pounds. Actually, I kind of cut it for this purposes, but if I'm going to do 100 pounds of meat, I need 10 pounds of dry cure. All right, and in here, I've got 8 pounds of salt and about 2 pounds of brown sugar. You can use white sugar, but I prefer brown sugar because I think it gives it a little bit more of a, brown sugar has more molasses, so it has more of that molasses flavor to it, all right? And so I like that. Now I've also, if you kind of dig through here, we've added some red pepper flake and things like that, a little bit of paprika for color, all right? And I'm going to take this belly, and this is really fun to do. I'm going to do it in this lug because we don't want to make a mess. This is dry curing, folks. And I'm just going to cover the top of this guy. Now I know from research, and I know from old wives' tales, that this salt cure is going to penetrate. This is actually a sugar cure because it has sugar added to it. This guy is going to penetrate this belly at about 1 inch per week. And this belly is a little bit over 1.5 inches, so about a week and a half, maybe 10 to 14 days, he's going to be cured. And what you're going to see if you come out is tomorrow you're going to come out and say, well, it doesn't look like there's that much. You see what it looks like today? You're going to come back tomorrow and half this is going to be gone because it's already started to penetrate through here. All right? Now, you can do a couple of things. After 10 to 14 days with this cure mixture on here, what I like to do at UK is we'll take this guy out, we'll fill a big vat, put these bellies in there and soak them in there for about 12 hours or so. what we're doing is, we've brined them and now we're debrining them. So we've cured them, we're gonna pull some of that solid out. Yes, sir.
What temperature are you holding them at while you're putting the cure on?
In the cooler, in the 45 or less. Okay, and so, well, like I said, I'll put them in a vat of water for about 12 hours, change it about every 6, and then pull them out, put them on a baking comb, which is just basically a big spike that goes through the end of there. Dry them off, smoke them, cook them to an internal temperature, about 120, 125. Pull them out, and you got dry cured bacon. You can leave these guys in here for 10, 14 days, move them to a slightly warmer environment, and dry cure them even further and age them, and you're going to get a more intense flavor, much like what we're going to do with this guy here. You can make a country bacon that way.
Without smoking it?
Without smoking or smoking, it's up to you. That's the personal preference. Same thing with this guy right here, this ham. All right. Use the same mixture. And if you still find a grocery store that actually has paper bags, this is what you want to use. Now we actually have a waxless paper that we use, but not everybody has access to the waxless paper. And so I thought, well, I will grab some bags from the paper bags from the meat lab to do this. Basically, when you do your country ham, you don't want to use waxed paper. Why? Because you want the moisture to escape. If you have waxed paper, guess what's going to happen? They're just going to rot, not rust, rot. Okay? So, same deal, folks. Same deal. Put this stuff on here. Now, the challenge with this guy is the skin. All right, because he's so dehydrated, we're not going to get any penetration there. So I'm just going to do this for illustration purposes. Normally you like to do this about 24 hours after they've been processed. And you just rub this stuff on here. You want to make close, careful attention to this piece right here. What I like to do is kind of loosen up the skin around the hock. Okay? I'll take my cure. I'm going to start working it in those folds. Why? Because this is the toughest part of the ham to cure. There's a joint down in there, that stifle joint, like so. And if we don't get cured down to that stifle joint, he's going to rot. And you get what's called bone salad in those joints. And it'll ruin a ham. So we'll pay extra careful attention to get as much cure down in there as we can. We work on our 4-Hers to do the same thing. And then, once we get it on there, so we're just going to carefully wrap things up. So the paper bag works well because we have these things called ham socks. Yeah. And it'll fit. Now for these, the 4-H hams, the leaders yell at me because I buy extra small ham socks for them. And the reason I do that is because it's like putting a girdle on this ham. is they're making show hams for 4-H. And when you put a girdle on there, it helps them form that teardrop shaped bed. And so in January, they're always calling me up saying, socks are too small, the socks are too small. They'll fit. They'll fit. Just like that. I'm gonna hang him up. Usually on country hams, you wanna know weight, because we're going to, this is called a bag cure method. About 2 days for every pound of ham. If they freeze, you don't count those days. All right? If you're doing the salt box method, where let's say you drill a few holes in this lug here, and just cover it in salt, and the reason why I drill holes in there so the moisture can drain off of them. It's usually the same thing, about 1 inch per week, like we did the bellies. And then you can move them into a warmer environment. So if you start in January, you really don't have to worry about shucking these bag cured hams until around the 1st of, or the end of April, 1st of May. So about Derby time is when we usually think about shucking hams. And we'll come in and just remove the sock, remove the paper, clean them up a little bit, put a brand new sock on them, set them up in the back where we hung them at for however long you want to age them. Obviously, the longer you age them, the more intense those flavors are going to be. Make sense?
How about skippers?
Skippers are not
Insects?
nearly the problem they used to be. However, larder beetles, mites are an issue. Legally, you're not supposed to use this because it's an off-label use for it, but we've had some success with, and I don't know why it's a problem with hams. The USDA hasn't approved it, but we use it on vegetables, and that's 7 dust. Sprinkle a little bit of 7 dust on there. There's an old adage, and I don't like this stuff one bit. Cover them in borax. You know, that stuff doesn't come off. That 7 dust, you can spray it off. Obviously, you're going to clean these guys before you cook them. But that 7 dust comes off. The borax just stays with it.
What's the difference in the weight of a green ham and a finished cured ham?
This guy's probably clocking in there. He felt around 25 plus pounds. When he's done, let's say if we put him in the cooler and we pull him out 9 months from now, he's probably going to weigh around 13 to 15 pounds. So he's going to lose quite a bit of weight.
If you had it in a smokehouse, you don't want bugs or something on it, why couldn't you just wrap the belly the same way with the brown bag? Would it?
The bellies, you'll get bugs on bellies if you dry cure them. You know, you age them like that, you can get that as well. The thing about what folks think, well, I'll just leave that bag on there. I'll keep the bugs off, right? You gotta realize those bugs have mouth parts that are adapted to tearing flesh away, so that bag is nothing to them. They'll go right, and I've got pictures. If you're dying to know, I could probably pull them off my jump drive, but you actually see where bugs, it looks like they just took a drill and went to get inside to that ham. That didn't
Flies.
stop them one bit.
Flies or anything though, would it help with flies at all?
It help a little bit with flies. Flies don't bother me so much unless they're the skippers, skippers are real tiny things. So we really don't have the problems with skippers like we do the other beetles. So.
So you only put the dry cure on one time, and the second time you just put the
If you're
salt?
doing bag cure, yeah. Usually for a 25-pound ham, I'm gonna put about 2.5 pounds of cure on there. If you're doing the box method like that, I'm gonna take that 2.5 pounds of cure and divide it by 3, and put 1/3 of that on week 1, 1/3 of that on week 2, and then the remaining on week 3. So. And I like to tell you, we've got extension publications explaining that, but it's somewhere on my laptop and I haven't finished it yet. As David knows, you got a bunch of those that you've been working on for about a year, and you just don't always seem to find time to get around to finishing them up.
Could you bone the ham and go from there?
You can. What I would do is do single muscles and not bone it out and then try to fold them back together, because what happens is you'll get mold growing on the inside where you folded it back together.
Okay. So you just kind of lay it out and then just
Yep.
rub
And
it all
and
down?
just leave it as a whole piece. And in fact, that's what the Germans do with the, a true Black Forest ham is boneless ham like that, where they just do a single muscle. And it doesn't take as long to cure them as 9 months, you know, for these guys, because you're dealing with a smaller muscle, but you can't
It'd be
do.
more like the bacon then, wouldn't it?
Yep, yep.
Okay.
You could probably finish one of those up in about 3 to 6 months.
What's the prosciutto cure?
Prosciutto is the Italian ham. Those guys are made exactly the same way. The only difference with them is they just use straight sea salt. They don't use any sugar or anything like that. They're aged for about 2 years. Most of our country hams are aged for about 9 months. Aging them for 2 years, how they keep them from drying out is they coat them with lard. And that keeps the moisture from escaping. Like on country hams, we don't do that. So, you know, a good country ham is 9 to 12 months old, whereas those prosciuttos are usually 2 years old, but they've coated them with lard so they don't dry out as fast. And they're just straight. And now what makes those guys so unique is one of the things we didn't talk about is our pig's gonna taste like he does because he has been consuming corn and soybeans. Those prosciutto hams taste the way they do because they've been feeding on parsnips and the whey from the Parmesan cheese factory, so they're gonna have a different flavor. The Iberian hams from Spain have been fed acorns and things like that, so they're gonna have a different flavor as well.
Kind of like the goat's milk.
Exactly, exactly.
Are there other combinations of cure that,
You can use straight salt if you want to. My only thing is 80% of that, or at least 60% of that cure's gotta be salt. I usually tell people 80% of that cure's gotta be salt, just be on the safe side. So you know, like I said, there's folks out there that use white sugar instead of brown. There's folks that use more red and black pepper or more paprika than what we've got in this mix. It just, the main ingredient's gotta be salt.
you don't like the Morton?
You can use the Morton as well. It's mainly salt as well. The Morton sugar cure. Yep. Yeah, you can use that as well. That's an easy way of doing it. Exactly. Now, one thing I didn't talk about, I use just a grocery store bag. Here's questions I get, all right? Can I use a feed sack? Well, you can, but it's gonna taste like whatever feed's been in there, all right? Another one, can I use an old fertilizer bag? That should answer itself, but I still get that phone call, okay? Or, when I was in Missouri and I was judging a 4-H show, I picked this ham up and it smelled just like diesel fuel. And the little boy that, it was his ham, he was standing next to me, I'm thinking, why does this thing smell like diesel fuel? And I looked down at him, he had a John Deere hat on. And I said, I forget the boy's name, and I said, did you keep your ham around your dad's tractor? And he said, yeah. He said, I used the tractor. I climbed up on the tractor. I hung the ham from the rafters. I climbed up the tractor to check the ham. And so I'm imagining every time Dad fired up this diesel engine, that black smoke just bathed this thing in that diesel fuel. And so it did smell exactly like diesel fuel. I said, you may not want to eat this. So you gotta be, if you're one of those weird people that actually park your car in your garage and you do this in your garage, it may taste like car exhaust or smell like car exhaust. So you be careful with that.
So you can use any kind of paper.
As long as it's,
bag,
long as it's
not
waxless,
waxed.
you know, yeah. As long as the moisture can escape. So, like I said, at the lab, we've got white butcher paper that we use that's not waxed. So, we do have wax paper and we run into people that get confused on that, but the reason why I grabbed the grocery store bag is most of you have access to that.
I gotta be the dumbest person here, I guess. I've asked the most questions.
No.
Anyway.
Most inquisitive.
So I'm not gonna be killing any hogs or processing anything. But I wanna do some hams.
Yep.
So I went a couple years ago and went up to Brooksville
Yep.
and got 2 hams. What should I ask for? Is there anything special? By the way, I hung them and did everything I thought right and
Yeah.
hung them up And one day I went down and they were gone.
As far as mice and
Gone.
rats,
Gone.
gone as in thief in the night.
No, I think they were four-legged. I think they were raccoons.
Oh,
All I had was a hanging sack,
hanging sack.
2 of them. That was about 4 or 5 months in.
Yeah.
They must have been good, I figured.
Yeah, you're kind of like that 4-H agent that brought me a ham, and you can't make this stuff up, folks. This ham had a nice little kind of quarter-sized tunnel in it. And she says, "What caused that?" And I said, "Judging by the whiskers and the nose staring at me, that's a mouse." Which, in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have said that while she was standing right by my ear when she screamed at the top of her lungs.
But my question on the,
Yeah.
going to a processor,
You want, if you can go, I'm gonna pick on Paul, okay, he owns a processing company. You go Paul and say, if you got some hams that are about 24 to 36 hours old, those work best. If you can't, make sure you get them to where they're vacuum packaged, so like if you go to a grocery store and you have them order you some green hams, they're gonna come in vacuum packaged. And the reason why I say that is I want that skin to still be fairly pliable. Now, if they're vacuum packaged, that skin's still
well,
pliable.
he called me, he said, I got
Yeah.
got 2, come on up.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
did. But they were a little big for me, but
Yeah, well, then you would ask him, if you order them, tell him you want 18 and down, which are 18 pounds and down.
it
instead
didn't
of
sit
these
on the
20.
ground like that, you said, though. It didn't,
What's that?
it wouldn't sit straight up like
Wouldn't
that.
sit straight up?
No,
Yeah, that's just people that don't know how to cut meat.
okay.
What's the regulations on finishing a ham? Say you've already been to a USDA processor and it's slaughtered
Yep.
USDA and everything.
It's gotta, if you're going to sell that ham once you're done with it, it's all gonna be done under USDA. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, if you wanna buy that ham like he was talking about and take it home for your own consumption, you're okay. It's just when you sell it that you get in trouble. And I get these phone calls every summer. I bought a package of ground beef at a farmer's market and it says not for sale on there. What does that mean? Well, that means that it was a custom slaughtered animal. It doesn't mean the process, it does nothing. It still can be saved, but it's just not legal. Most things. So, like when I drove down here at 60 and a 55, you know, I broke the law, but I still feel I was pretty safe. So, one of those deals. Good questions. What else? Let me show you some websites. Because a lot of you think, well, this is kind of neat, this is no requirement.